A little girl climbs onto her dying mother's hospital bed for one last hug. Doctors already turning off life support. But as she whispers "I love you, mommy" into her mother's ear, the flatline monitor suddenly beeps to life. What happens next leaves medical staff frozen in disbelief, witnessing something that defies all scientific explanation. The day had begun like any other for Emma Reynolds. She woke early, as 7-year-olds often do on Saturday mornings, and crept downstairs in her unicorn pajamas, careful not to wake her father, who had finally fallen asleep on the living room couch. House felt different, somehow quieter, heavier in the 4 days since her mother had been rushed to the hospital. Emma poured herself a bowl of cereal, the small act of independence, both a point of pride and a painful reminder of her mother's absence. She missed the way her mom would cut fruit into star shapes and place them around the rim of the bowl, turning breakfast into something magical. Everything was just ordinary now. Her father, David, had tried his best to maintain normalcy, but Emma could see the redness in his eyes each morning, could hear his muffled sobs behind the bathroom door when he thought she was asleep. Adults always believed children didn't notice these things, but Emma noticed everything. She knew her mother was very sick, something wrong with her heart, her father had explained. She understood that the doctors were doing everything they could, but sometimes even doctors couldn't fix everything. What she didn't understand was why she wasn't allowed to visit, to see her mom, to tell her about the drawing she'd made in art class, or how she'd remembered to water all the plants just like she'd been taught. That morning Emma was halfway through her cereal when the phone rang. She watched as her father jolted awake, fumbling for the receiver, his voice hoarse as he answered. Emma couldn't hear the words from the other end, but she saw how her father's face changed, how it seemed to crumple inward, his shoulders hunching as if bearing a sudden invisible weight. "We'll be right there," he said finally, hanging up the phone and turning to Emma with eyes that scared her more than any monster under the bed ever could. "Emma, sweetheart," he began, kneeling before her, his hands trembling as they held hers. "We need to go to the hospital. The doctors say," he paused, swallowing hard. "They say it's time to say goodbye to Mom." Emma blinked, not fully comprehending. "Is Mom going somewhere?" Her father pulled her into a tight hug, his tears warm against her neck. "Oh, Emma, Mom is very, very sick. Her heart isn't working properly, and the doctors have done everything they can. They don't think she's going to wake up." Emma pulled back, her small brow furrowed. "But she has to wake up. She promised to take me to the aquarium next weekend." David Reynolds had never known a pain like this, trying to explain death to a child who still believed in the absolute nature of promises. "Sometimes," he said gently, "people can't keep their promises, even when they want to more than anything in the world." The drive to Memorial Hospital seemed to take both forever and no time at all. Emma sat in the back seat, clutching the drawing she'd made for her mother. A family portrait with all three of them standing under a rainbow, surrounded by flowers that looked like multicolored stars. She'd worked on it for 3 days, determined to make it perfect. In her other hand, she held her mother's favorite scrunchie, the soft velvet one with tiny embroidered daisies. Her mother had worn it the day she collapsed, and Emma had found it on the bathroom counter, forgotten in the rush to the ambulance. She'd kept it under her pillow every night since. "Will Mom be awake when we get there?" Emma asked, her small voice barely audible over the car's engine. Her father's eyes met hers in the rearview mirror, red-rimmed and glistening. "No, sweetheart. Mom is in what doctors call a coma. She's asleep, but it's a very deep sleep that she might not wake up from." "Can she hear me if I talk to her?" Some people believe that yes, people in comas can hear the voices of those they love. "I think it's worth trying, don't you?" Emma nodded solemnly. She had so much to tell her mother. Memorial Hospital loomed large and imposing against the morning sky, its windows reflecting the clouds like mirrors. Emma had always disliked hospitals. They smelled strange, like the cleaning supplies her mother kept under the sink mixed with something else, something that made her nose wrinkle. They were met in the lobby by Dr. Carter, the cardiologist who had been treating Sarah Reynolds since her collapse. His face was grave as he shook David's hand and bent slightly to acknowledge Emma. "We've done everything medically possible," he explained quietly, as they walked toward the elevator, speaking in the hushed tones adults used when they thought children weren't listening. "The latest scan shows minimal brain activity. Her heart is failing despite the medication and interventions. I'm very sorry, but I believe it's time to consider removing life support." Emma watched her father's Adam's apple bob as he swallowed hard. "And there's nothing else? No experimental treatments? No other specialists?" Dr. Carter shook his head sadly. We've consulted with top specialists across the country. This type of acute heart failure following viral myocarditis is rare but devastating. Her body simply isn't responding to treatment. The elevator doors opened with a soft ding, and Emma felt her father's hand tighten around hers as they stepped inside. The ride to the 5th floor seemed to take forever, the elevator stopping at nearly every floor to let people on and off. Doctors in white coats, nurses in colorful scrubs, visitors with flowers and balloons. Emma wondered why anyone would bring balloons to a hospital. Was someone having a party? She couldn't imagine feeling like celebrating anything in this place that smelled of sadness and chemicals. Room 304 was at the end of a long corridor, slightly apart from the other rooms. Emma's father knelt before her just outside the door, gently turning her to face him. "Emma, sweetheart, Mom is going to look different than you remember. She has tubes and wires connected to her to help her body function. It might seem scary, but those things aren't hurting her, okay? They're helping her." Emma nodded solemnly. "Can I give her my drawing?" "Of course you can." Her father's voice cracked slightly. "And you can talk to her too. Tell her anything you want her to know." Taking a deep breath, David pushed open the door to room 304, still holding Emma's hand tightly in his own. The first thing Emma noticed was the beeping, a steady rhythmic sound that filled the room like mechanical heartbeats. Then she saw her mother, and she froze, her small body tensing in the doorway. Sarah Reynolds lay still and pale against the white hospital sheets, nearly indistinguishable from them except for her long brown hair spread across the pillow. Tubes and wires seemed to connect her to the machines surrounding the bed, each one blinking or beeping, or displaying numbers and lines that meant nothing to Emma. This wasn't her mother, not the woman who danced around the kitchen while making pancakes, who knew how to fix any scrape or hurt feeling, who smelled like vanilla and whose laugh could fill a room. This was someone else. Someone made of wax and silence. "Mom," Emma whispered, her voice small and uncertain. Dr. Carter and a nurse were already in the room, making notes on a chart and adjusting one of the many machines. The doctor turned when they entered, his expression softening as he saw Emma's wide-eyed gaze fixed on her mother. "Hello, Emma," he said gently. "You can come closer if you'd like. It's okay to touch your mom, to hold her hand or give her a hug. That won't hurt her at all." Encouraged by the doctor's words, Emma took a tentative step forward, then another, until she was standing beside the bed. Up close she could see that it was indeed her mother, the small freckle near her left eyebrow, the slight curl at the ends of her hair, the delicate silver chain around her neck with the heart-shaped locket that held a tiny photo of Emma as a baby. "Hi, Mommy," she said, her voice stronger now. "I brought you a picture I made." David lifted Emma onto the edge of the bed so she could be closer, careful to avoid disturbing any of the tubes or wires. Emma gently placed her drawing on her mother's chest, smoothing it carefully with her small hands. "It's us, you and me and Daddy under a rainbow. And those are the flowers from your garden, the ones you love, the yellow ones that smell like sunshine." Doc Carter exchanged a glance with the nurse, then moved toward David. "Mr. Reynolds, if I could speak with you privately for a moment." "The nurse will stay with Emma." David hesitated, looking between his daughter and the doctor, then nodded reluctantly. "I'll be right back, Em. Just going to talk to Dr. Carter outside for a minute." Emma barely acknowledged her father's words, too focused on her mother's face, searching for any sign of recognition or response. When the door closed behind the men, the nurse, her name tag read Maggie, smiled kindly at Emma. "You can keep talking to your mom," she encouraged. "Sometimes people in deep sleep like this can still hear us, even if they can't respond." "Really?" Emma asked, hope flickering in her eyes. "Many people believe so," Maggie replied, "and I've been a nurse for 20 years, so I've seen some pretty amazing things." Emboldened, Emma leaned closer to her mother. "Mom, I've been taking care of the plants like you showed me, even the fussy ones in the kitchen window, and I've been helping Daddy with dinner, but he doesn't cut the carrots into flowers like you do." She paused, reaching out tentatively to touch her mother's hand. It felt cool and somehow smaller than she remembered. "Miss Lee at school said I have to do my science project with Jasmine now. Because you can't help me, but I told her I'd wait until you're better because we already planned to do the one about how plants drink water and turn it different colors." Outside the room, Dr. Carter was explaining the situation to David in gentle but clinical terms. Brain scans showing diminishing activity, heart function continuing to deteriorate despite maximum medical intervention. Quality of life considerations, end-of-life decisions. We're reaching the point where continuing life support is merely prolonging the inevitable, he said quietly, and potentially causing suffering we cannot measure. David's face was ashen. How long does she have if he couldn't finish the sentence. Once life support is removed, likely only minutes. Her heart is too damaged to function on its own. Dr. Carter placed a compassionate hand on David's shoulder. I know this is an impossible decision, but I believe it's time to consider what Sarah would want. Inside the room, unaware of the conversation happening in the hallway, Emma continued her one-sided dialogue with her mother. She told her about the class hamster who had escaped and been found in the principal's office, about how Dad had accidentally turned all their white laundry pink, about the new song she'd learned in music class. Daddy misses you a lot, she confided, her voice dropping to a whisper. He tries to pretend he's okay, but I hear him crying at night when he thinks I'm asleep, and he keeps forgetting things, like my lunch and when to water the plants. We need you to come home, Mom. When David and Dr. Carter returned to the room, their somber expressions went unnoticed by Emma, who was now carefully placing her mother's scrunchie around her wrist. I kept it safe for you, she was saying. It's your favorite one, with the little daisies. David took a deep breath, his heart breaking as he prepared to explain to his daughter what would happen next. But before he could speak, Carter put a gentle hand on his arm, signaling him to wait. Emma, the doctor said softly, approaching the bed, your dad and I need to talk to you about something important. Your mom's heart is very, very sick, and the machines we have aren't making it better. Emma looked up, her eyes moving between the doctor and her father. But she just needs more time, right, to get better. Dr. Carter exchanged a glance with David, who nodded slightly, giving permission to continue. Sometimes, Emma, people get so sick that they can't get better, no matter how much time they have or how hard the doctors try. Even with all the machines, Emma asked, her voice small. Even with all the machines, Dr. Carter confirmed gently. And when that happens, sometimes the kindest thing we can do is to let them go peacefully, without all these tubes and wires. Emma's eyes widened as understanding dawned. You're going to take away the machines that are helping her. David moved quickly to his daughter's side, sitting on the edge of the bed and pulling her into his arms. The machines aren't helping her get better anymore, Emma. They're just preventing her from being at peace. Carter thinks it's time to say goodbye, to let Mom go where she won't be hurting anymore. But I don't want her to go, Emma whispered, tears spilling onto her cheeks. I need her here. I know, sweetheart. I do too. David's voice broke, his own tears falling freely now. But sometimes loving someone means letting them go, and staying is too painful. The next hour passed in a blur of quiet preparations. The hospital chaplain visited briefly, offering a prayer at David's request. Close family friends arrived to provide support. Nurses came and went, preparing paperwork and explaining the process in hushed, respectful tones. Through it all, Emma remained by her mother's side, sometimes talking to her, sometimes just holding her hand. She seemed to understand, in the way children sometimes grasp the gravity of situations beyond their experience, that these were her final moments with her mother. Finally, when there was nothing left to do, no more forms to sign or calls to make, Carter approached the bed once more. We're ready whenever you are, Mr. Reynolds, he said quietly. Would you like some time alone with your wife before we proceed? David nodded gratefully. Just a few minutes, please. The medical staff filed out, leaving the family alone in the quiet room. David sat on one side of the bed, Emma on the other, both holding Sarah's hands. I don't know if you can hear me, Sarah, David began, his voice thick with emotion. But I want you to know that Emma and I will be okay. Somehow we'll find our way. You taught us both how to be strong. He paused, struggling to continue. I'll make sure Emma knows how much you loved her, every single day. How proud you were of her. I'll tell her all our stories, again and again, so she never forgets. He leaned forward, pressing his lips to his wife's forehead. Thank you for the most beautiful years of my life. For loving me. For giving me Emma. I'll love you until my last breath, and then I'll find you again. When David finally sat back, wiping tears from his face, he looked across at Emma. Do you want to say anything to Mom before the doctors come back? Emma nodded solemnly. Can I give her a hug first? Of course, sweetheart. Carefully, David helped Emma climb fully onto the bed, showing her how to avoid the tubes and wires. Emma stretched out alongside her mother's still form, resting her head on her shoulder and draping one arm across her chest in a gentle embrace, the way they used to lie together during their bedtime reading ritual. David watched, his heart simultaneously breaking and swelling with love for his daughter's tender gesture. He knew he would carry this image with him forever, his little girl saying goodbye to her mother with such pure, uncomplicated love. "I love you, Mommy," Emma whispered, her face turned toward her mother's ear. "I'm sorry you can't keep your promise about the aquarium. That's okay. Daddy says sometimes people can't keep promises even when they really want to." She paused, her small fingers gently stroking her mother's hair. "I promise, I'll be good for Daddy. I'll help him remember things, and I'll take care of your flowers, and I'll try not to be sad all the time." She lifted her head slightly, looking at her mother's peaceful face. "Don't be scared, okay? Daddy says you're going somewhere peaceful. Maybe it's like the beach we went to last summer, where the water was so clear and blue. You loved that place." Emma laid her head back down, tightening her embrace ever so slightly. "Goodbye, Mommy," she whispered, her voice breaking on the final word. "I love you infinity plus infinity." It was their special saying, a bedtime ritual that had started when Emma was just 3 and trying to express how much she loved her mother. Sarah had always responded with "I love you infinity plus 1, turning it into a game that Emma invariably won by adding ever larger numbers until they both dissolved into giggles. In the profound silence that followed Emma's farewell, David closed his eyes, preparing himself for what came next. For the doctor's return, for the machines to be turned off, for the final moments of his wife's life. But in that stillness, something happened that no one could have anticipated. So subtle at first that David thought he'd imagined it. A slight change in the rhythm of the heart monitor. Not the dramatic flatline he'd been dreading, but a shift in the pattern of beeps. Then Emma gasped, sitting up abruptly. "Daddy!" "Mommy squeezed my hand." She did. David's eyes flew open, his gaze immediately going to the monitor, where the erratic pattern was indeed changing, becoming more regular, more normal. "Emma," he said cautiously, not wanting to give her false hope, "sometimes there can be involuntary movements that—" "I love you infinity plus 1, came a whisper, so faint it was barely audible. David froze, certain he was hallucinating from stress and grief. But Emma's face transformed with pure joy. "She said it, Daddy. She said our special saying." At that moment, the door opened and Dr. Carter entered, followed by a nurse. They'd clearly been monitoring the changes from outside, their expressions a mixture of professional concern and barely concealed astonishment. "Mr. Reynolds," Dr. Carter began, moving swiftly to check the monitors, "there appears to be an unexpected change in your wife's condition." He pulled out a small light, leaning over to shine it into Sarah's eyes. "Mrs. Reynolds, can you hear me?" To everyone's shock, Sarah's eyelids fluttered slightly. Then with visible effort, they opened halfway, her gaze immediately finding Emma. "My sweet girl," she managed, each word a monumental effort. The room erupted into controlled chaos. Dr. Carter barking orders, nurses rushing in with equipment, monitors being checked and rechecked. David stood frozen, unable to process what was happening, while Emma remained on the bed, still holding her mother's hand, a smile of absolute certainty on her face. "I told you she could hear me," she said to no one in particular. Hours later, after countless tests and examinations, Dr. Carter sat with David in the small consultation room adjacent to the cardiac unit. Emma had finally been persuaded to go to the cafeteria with a family friend, allowing the adults to speak frankly. "I've been practicing medicine for 20 years, Mr. Reynolds," Dr. Carter began, his expression still reflecting his disbelief, "and I have never seen anything like what happened today. By every medical standard, your wife's heart was failing beyond recovery. There was no clinical reason to expect improvement, let alone the dramatic stabilization we're seeing." David ran a hand through his hair, still trying to process the day's events. "But she's really improving. This isn't just some sort of temporary, I don't know, a final surge before." He couldn't finish the sentence. Dr. Carter shook his head decisively. "No, this is different. Her heart rhythm has stabilized. Brain function is increasing. She's breathing more independently. These are all significant improvements that contradict everything we understood about her condition just hours ago." He leaned forward, his voice lowering slightly. "I don't use this word lightly, Mr. Reynolds, but what we witnessed today defies medical explanation. Some might call it a miracle." "Emma," David said quietly. It was Emma. Something about her being there, talking to Sarah, hugging her. Dr. Carter nodded thoughtfully. There's a growing body of research on the physiological impacts of emotional connection, particularly between parents and children. But even with that context, this case is remarkable. Will she recover completely? David asked, afraid to hope too much. It's too early to say with certainty, Dr. Carter replied cautiously. But I'm significantly more optimistic than I was this morning. The next 48 hours will tell us more, but the immediate danger appears to have passed. 6 months later, Sarah Reynolds sat on a bench at the city aquarium, watching as Emma pressed her face against the glass of the penguin exhibit, delighting in their underwater acrobatics. David stood nearby, camera in hand, capturing the moment with a smile that hadn't dimmed since that incredible day in the hospital. Sarah's recovery had been remarkable by any standard. After 2 more weeks in the hospital and months of cardiac rehabilitation, she had regained nearly all her strength and function. The medical team still had no definitive explanation for her recovery, though her case had been written up in several medical journals and was still being studied by specialists around the country. Some called it a medical anomaly, others, a miracle. For the Reynolds family, the label mattered less than the reality. They had been given a second chance, an unexpected gift of time together that they cherished every day. Emma skipped back to the bench, her eyes bright with excitement. "Mom!" The penguin looked right at me. "Did you see?" "I did," Sarah smiled, opening her arms for a hug. "He definitely likes you." As Emma snuggled against her, Sarah met David's gaze over their daughter's head, their eyes communicating what words couldn't fully express. The gratitude, the wonder, the profound awareness of how close they had come to a very different outcome. "You kept your promise about the aquarium," Emma said, looking up at her mother with a smile. Sarah smoothed her daughter's hair, blinking back tears. "I did, and I'll keep all my promises to you, Emma. Every single one." What neither of them said aloud, but both understood in their own ways, was the truth at the heart of their story. Sometimes the most powerful force in the universe isn't medicine or science or even logic, it's love. The pure, uncompromising love of a child who refuses to say goodbye, whose embrace can reach beyond consciousness itself, calling back a heart that had already begun to let go. As they continued their tour of the aquarium, hand in hand, Sarah felt the strong, steady rhythm of her heart, a constant reminder of the final embrace that had defied all explanation and changed their lives forever. Sometimes miracles wear unicorn pajamas and speak in small voices. And sometimes the most powerful words in the world are as simple as "I love you, Mommy," whispered directly into the heart that needs most to hear them. Have you ever witnessed a moment where love overcame the impossible? Sarah's remarkable recovery reminds us that sometimes, when science reaches its limits, the heart finds another way. If this story of a child's final embrace bringing her mother back from the brink touched your soul, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support allows us to continue sharing these extraordinary stories of hope, healing, and the profound connections that define our humanity. Share this with someone who needs a reminder that miracles still happen every day, sometimes in the most unexpected forms. Until next time, remember that even in our darkest hours, love remains the most powerful force in the universe. What unexplained miracle have you witnessed in your own life? We'd love to hear your stories in the comments below.